It is time for Cover Your Assets. We'll bring in our good friend Jim Lynch. Jim is an independent voice on Wall Street, the economy, and politics, bringing over 40 years of experience to these subjects and more. And we remind you that when Jill and I and Jim get together and we get in our heated debates, the opinions we express are those of ourselves and don't represent anybody else but us. All right? Right, Jim?
Amen, brother.
Amen. Amen.
That's all right. We only have to use the disclaimer
numerous times over the course of numerous shows, but that's what radio's all about, delivering different opinions. All right. So, Mr. Lynch, let's see. I know what we'll talk about today. Well, let's see. What is it?
The Giants. How you didn't have to worry this weekend.
We've talked about it. Could be
something good. The Giants.
Could be the Giants. Could it be the weather? Somehow, I get a feeling in the back of my mind it's going to be on the elections.
Oh, you devil! You devil!
I'm a magician. I know it in advance.
You read my notes. Well, the day is here.
Yep.
And it's time to register your voice and your needs and your wants and your desires. Get rid of your frustrations and vote.
Jim,
when it's over, and then we'll do whatever we do, as we always do as a democracy.
You know, Jim, we were talking beforehand. Axios has a great story that in this election cycle, $4 billion is being spent for the midterm elections. $4 billion.
Well, it's an incredible number, but I'd say on a value basis, it's utterly horrible because we get nothing. We get what goes into doesn't go into the economy.
No, money. I always say every election cycle, people say, "Well, it's good for the economy." No, every election cycle, the money doesn't come to the regular economy. It stays in that one sector. It never gets into the regular economy.
Right, and because of this approach, we get a lot of mediocre people who are willing to sacrifice their principles to get elected, and some of those same people ordained to put things in ads that are quite despicable. But let's get beyond that. Let's simply say this, in my opinion, if you want to take care of yourself and take care of your country, this election is one in which you really should register your vote and your concerns. And the only way to do that is to vote Democratic. We need to check Trump. He is out of control. He's an unstable person. And, if you look at his behavior, he's unstable, okay? You can say he's joking. You can say this. He is the president of the United States of America. And I defy anybody to come up with any example of any past president that gets anywhere close to his behavior, to his deceit, his lack of empathy, and his just meanness. And this is not what we've been used to, which is why the media, I think, has had such a difficult time in corralling this guy. And they go and they put him on the television, no matter what he says, well, they used to anyway. It's time for that to stop. This man has nothing good to say, and you can cover him without giving him an audience. I think these press reporters should show up. One shows up for the pool and then gets it out on the phone in terms of what he said. This guy is... he goes crazy with an audience. He's a showman, and he doesn't care what he says and who he hurts. Let's get to what's in our interest, folks. The first thing is health care. The Republicans have stepped up their line that they're going to keep your ability to continue to get treatment for a previous illness. That's a lie, okay? They've been working on legislation to take it away. So put that in the Democratic column. They're for it. Gun control. How many more people do we have to have shot? Kids shooting adults, people blowing up the yoga centers, sending pipe bombs through the mail. The people who get hurt by pipe bombs are normally not the person it's sent to, but somebody on the path, be it the postal worker or some innocent bystander. The environment. If you haven't seen what's going on in this world, economically and environmentally, you must be in a cave. We have. I'm not saying anybody can say with certainty that the environmental problems, climate change, are caused by what we're doing, namely emitting a lot of pollution into the air. But the point is, let's try and do something about it. The economy is being driven, so everybody has theirs nowadays, but the future is the future, and nobody bothers with it. We need a tax cut for the middle class because the middle class was screwed with the last tax cut. We need job training for a new economy. We're not prepared for a new economy. Other countries are developing science while we are just sitting on things like build a wall or let's put children in pens. As we go forward here, I think we really must take into consideration the fact that Donald Trump is in the grip of the Russians and the Saudis. The Saudis have been pouring money into his family's coffers. The Russians have already done their deed. So if you want a safe country, if you want a democracy, vote Democrat.
You know, listening to you, Jim, a couple things come to mind. I did post this on my personal page, and I've talked about it in the past. I mean, I'm 66. Thank God Obamacare came when it did, and it covered major medical expenses I had over the past three and a half years. But now I'm on Medicare, and I get Part A and B, and I have a supplemental plan, and it's affordable. And I really did. I'm part of the electorate that think this. I said vote on Tuesday, and while you're voting, vote like my Medicare and Social Security depend on it, because it does. I mean, what I'm most concerned about is the House getting rid of and cutting back on Medicare. Now you have different people that are concerned about different things. Healthcare is a major mover in this election. But the big thing that I want to see is there's so far in early voting a huge turnout amongst young voters. And I don't know what they're voting on. I don't know whether they're voting on an issue or they're voting on a personality of the president. I would prefer people to vote on an issue. If you have an issue with the president or the House, I prefer you to do that.
I'm sorry. How can you expect people to vote on issues when they are when you don't have both sides of an issue? You can't find out both sides of an issue.
But it's still going to be interesting to see what these young people are voting on, Jim, because it's a block that normally doesn't show up, but it looks like it's showing up for the midterms, and it's going to be interesting to see what drives this tonight. I'm not normally a person that likes to follow the midterm results, but we locally have a couple of very, very good races here with, by the way, talented people on both sides. I think you tend to get that in local elections. We have very talented, nice, committed people running on against one another locally, which makes it extra special for us here. But really, the midterms, when you look at this, this is our snap election, even though it's not a snap election. This is where you can change the course of the way legislation is going.
Well, on a bright note, people are getting out. They're registering to vote. 36 million have voted already. There are a lot of young people who will be voting, which is very, very important. However, there is still a certain apathy among young people. And I think it's because we've just not educated them well enough in terms of the freedoms they have and what voting is all about. This concept that, their one vote doesn't matter is pretty ridiculous because it's called 1 + 1 = 2. And if you put your vote to work with other people's votes, you get something done. It's very sad to find that, I think in North Carolina, the last election, a lot of young people just said, we're not into it, we don't want to do it. If we recall the last election, it was only a small amount of votes in various states that basically changed who won that election. So every vote is important, but it is most important, I think, that our young people and all of us appreciate this right to vote. It's not a right that a lot of people have in a lot of different countries. And you should feel, after you vote today, no matter who you vote for, a very positive feeling because you've stepped forward and you've done something rather than sit on the sidelines and complain and worry and so forth and so on. We have a great opportunity here to course correct because it's not simply a vote against a president. It's a vote against the apathy and the laziness and all the corruption of the Republican Party in Congress, which is not getting off its duff to help the majority of people. 60-some-odd% of people did not get a tax decrease. That is incredible. By the same token, the tax cut was $1.5 trillion, resulting in going on $1 trillion deficit in our budget, which will mean interest rates will go higher, and probably the deficit is going to go higher because these tax cuts will continue to eat into the revenues normally created or rather generated by wealthy individuals and corporations. This is not a time to be apathetic. It's a time to take action and to vote. Now, Marshall has said you've got some great folks to vote for. I would say we've got a lot of great folks throughout the country who are now voting, who are standing up, women, minorities, because they see the handwriting on the wall. We're going right down the toilet if we continue this way with the type of leadership we have.
You know, I said this when I first came on, and I've said it every hour, because I do on my personal Facebook page. I am involved, and I just basically said for everybody who's posted a political opinion on Facebook, for everybody who's gotten angry for a person having an opinion on Facebook, for everybody who's promoted a candidate, no matter who it is, on Facebook, if you don't turn that social media that you have in your bloodstream into actually getting out in the social society and voting, there should be a way to ban you from ever participating in social media again. There really should, because it's an old adage. If you don't vote, then you really don't have a right to complain.
Amen.
It's just, it's so old. It's such a simple statement. But if you're just going to sit there and yap or sit at your keyboard and do this, type away, away. If you're just going to do that, and then you're not going to actually get out there, guess what? You don't deserve the right to have the liberties that people fought and died for in this country. You just don't. If you're not committed enough to go out and vote. And I know there's some people in some parts of the country that have their votes suppressed, their ability to vote suppressed. I'm not talking to those people. I know the hardships that they have. I've seen it. I'm talking about everyday Americans, everyday people. If you don't vote, then I don't want to see you on social media. Plain and simple.
And it's really interesting when you get down to here's a word that we've learned over the last 2 years, granular on this, because I have been having this debate with a very dear friend of mine who complains loudly and vociferously, but doesn't organize to get an absentee ballot because she can't get to the polling place. And it's like, it's not, we are well past, because there are so many venues to You allowed to say bitch on the radio?
Yeah.
Okay. There's so many. And P.S. More people have spent more time bitching in the last couple years than they've spent so much time bitching that they don't realize that there are a lot of people out there who haven't been bitching but have been like basically trying to go to work, because that is what discourse has become. That when you do have the opportunity to take some action and you don't, I do firmly believe that it should disqualify you from some element of this. I really do.
I just think that everybody that doesn't vote, Jim, if you're a voting age and you have a red dot that's placed on your forehead and it stays there for 2 years, so everybody knows. So if you start to open your mouth and complain, guess what?
It's like, yeah, thank
Somebody
you.
can say, thank you, you didn't vote. Get out of my way, please.
Right, I mean, or no, I'm happy to talk to you about the lifespan of the tsetse fly.
But really, I honest, Jim, it's just so upsetting that so many people don't. I mean, when people say, well, 50% of the people voted. Well, if you get 50% of Americans voting and somebody wins an election by 3 million or 4 million votes, guess what? That means roughly 20-some% of the country elected that person.
Yeah. No,
just think about this, folks.
No, and your point is well taken, because again, if you watch any of the cable news shows, they've been absolutely obsessing over the New York Times meter, the closeness of the vote. And this was very basic math, which I discovered on Sunday, because I looked at it and I was like, oh. And it was there was one specific thing. It was a tight race. I don't remember where it was. It was 42% for the Republican in red. It was 43% for the Democrat in blue, and underneath it was 42, 43, like 15% in light gray, undecided, and then an even smaller gray was a margin of error 6%. So it's like, well, that adds up to 21%, people.
That's the whole thing, Jim. And other countries, they have 70% turnout, 80% turnout, and we sit here and we seem to be happy.
We spent $11 billion for 50%.
It's shameful, Jim. It's absolutely shameful.
Well, it's time for people to listen to folks like you and step up and vote. And in voting, they're voting for themselves in the process of voting for others or voting for amendments. And folks in New York, be aware that you might take away some seats from the Republicans and maybe have a little different approach from the New York politicians. Scan your ballot and make sure you check everything that you should be checking and vote for everything that is on that ballot. It's not that difficult, but this will be your participation in your government, which is so important. And as Marshall has just said, so many people elsewhere in the world treasure their right to vote. Now, and there are many other people in this world who don't have the right to vote.
Now, Jim, take a look when Donald Trump was elected. The Women's March on Washington and all across the country. 3 million people showed up across the country. Never mind the other people across the world. 3 million people. I hope that those 3 million people show up at the polls.
Of course they will.
No, you gotta hope though. You can't say that. It's 2 years later.
I believe
no,
those
that
women
lot will show up. That lot will show up.
That they've created a groundswell of women. I think
that
women,
lot will show up. What you have to worry about is the people. You can only count what you see. You can't count what you don't see. Yeah. That's where people have. It's simply impossible to count what you don't see.
Well, we have about 2 minutes left, Jim, and we're going to give it to you because we took so much time from you. I'm sorry.
I love it. Your enthusiasm and your insights are exactly what people should be focusing on this morning. The weather has been a bit inclement but after the rain comes the sunshine, and after you vote, there'll be a lot of sun in your life. That said, if you pray, pray. If you don't pray, have some good thoughts. But keep in your mindset that somehow God will bless us with a successful election that will bring us together much more so than we've been in this country. So in passing the voting ballot, God bless America. You have a good week.
Jim, we'll speak to you next week.
You got it.
Bye-bye. Jim Lynch and Cover Your Assets this morning here on Robin Hood Radio.